The NFL free agency, or the NFL trade deadline rather, has come and gone. Guess what? The Jaguars turn to Cleveland from Minnesota. What does that mean? I'll tell you in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, y'all? Thanks and welcome to another edition of Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. And I'll remind you that on YouTube, at the Locked On Jaguars YouTube page, please go subscribe for free. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and hit that bell so you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And if you're riding around in your car or sitting at your desk, wherever you listen to your audio podcast, make sure you tap in there every single day so that you also do not miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. That is right. It is sponsored by FanDuel. Look, make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Shout out to the everydayers joining me every single day here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast. We call you everydayers because you do it every day. And if you're not an everydayer, you can be an everydayer by joining me every day. How about that? Every day ain't like this one, though, man. Trade deadline in the NFL. A lot of expectations for Jaguar fans. A lot of banter going back and forth between me and Jaguar fans on social. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain to you why the Jaguars turned to Cleveland from Minnesota for offensive line help. Hopefully I'll be joined by Locked On Vikings host Luke. I called him Luke. Look at that. Luke Braun. We're going to try to do it, hopefully. I'm trying to catch up with him, and our schedule's a little bit mixed up. And we're live, so the thing is if he's able to pop on, it'll help y'all understand who Ezra Cleveland is a little bit more than me, and you can hear it from another source instead of just hearing it from me. Understanding team building, and this is the disconnect that I have with a lot of fans, to the point where I basically told somebody, see, this, I'm going to save it for the segment, but there's a huge disconnect, and it's not because I'm close to team people or those folks don't talk to me. If they were talking to me, they ain't doing their job. I just watch what they have done forever, and I use that as a little bit of a baseline and understanding for how they move. Protect the asset. What do I mean by that in segment 3? Trevor Lawrence. Whatever the cost. I was going back and forth with somebody yesterday. You can never have too much pass rush. No, you can never have too much protection and too many bodyguards for your franchise quarterback. So we're going to discuss that at length. And then I'm going to talk about somebody that told me you can't develop on the bench. There's an entire NFL and college football department called player development, but this dude told me you ain't developing unless you ain't playing. So we'll talk about that too, how you can say something that absolutely has no basis. In fact, the evidence points in a different direction, but you'll be willing to cut me because I don't believe what you say. So we'll holler at all of that. But first and foremost, the Jaguars came into free agency needing a lot of things, according to a lot of people. Anyone who has listened to this show at any point over the last 4 years have heard me ad nauseum, constantly, even to the point of ridicule, talk about the offensive line. My thinking has been this: there's nothing wrong with getting guys that play a certain way and they're the best you can do. My thinking once they got Trevor Lawrence was championship, a sustained chance. I think back, it's hard to look at Tom Brady because that's the GOAT. And I think they lost 3 or 4 Super Bowls and he won 7. So that's like more than half the time the dude was playing for a championship. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about guys like Peyton Manning. I'm talking about guys like Drew Brees, that every single year for a decade or more, they had the opportunity to win. So my entire line of thinking has been building a championship offensive line once they got Trevor Lawrence. I think a lot of people thought because of the guys were names that you knew or you saw them go out. In fact, let me go back. I wanted the offensive line to be so good, in fact, that I wanted them to overpay to keep Jawan Taylor. And everybody knows that. And folks have, every time Jawan Taylor gives up a sack or jumps offside, I get people hit me. No, listen, it's consistent. That's how I am. I said they should have kept Jawan Taylor and still go back to the draft. I was talking about Osiris Torrance. I have been talking about that left guard position forever. I have been saying that I didn't think Cam Robinson was the championship left tackle. And I was unsure about Walker Little. So I have been on this offensive line kick for a long time, and the everydayers know it. So folks really, they're barking up the wrong tree when it comes to the offensive line, especially when they're trying to tell me why this makes no sense, or all of a sudden being an expert. This is what I've been talking about forever. And I've been arguing with people going back and forth. I've been telling you, a championship offensive line. The analogy I want to use as we talk about, I'm trying to save room that maybe Luke will join me here in a few seconds. But one of the analogies that I'll give is this. And anybody with kids can relate. All right. And I know kids aren't, the reason why I use kids is because the football team, like anything that used to go in my house before my kids left, I told them the worst thing you can do is do something bad. The next worst thing you can do is tell somebody outside the house about what's going on, unless of course it was something salacious, but it never was. But my point is never let them see you sweat. Don't show the emotion. Remember in the movie Training Day when you say you got to hide that love or people will eat you up. Folks will use leverage, and they do it in sports. They do it in sports. It's not the Jaguars' obligation to tell us what they really feel about people, right? It is not the obligation. It is not their obligation, unlike some college coaches, to tell you our guys stink. It is not it's not their obligation to tell you what their weaknesses are. It's not their obligation to also tell you the things they do that cover or how they call plays, getting the ball out quickly, how it hides glaring weaknesses that only they know that they have. They can't put certain things on tape because the other team's going. You don't know. You know what your kids' weaknesses are, but you're not going to call them ugly in front of other people, right? If my kids had a bell pepper nose on his face, but he's walking around out here like he Clark Gable or some damn body, I'll have a talk with him and tell him, bro, you need to calm down a little bit, right? You're shooting too high. You're aiming too high. Come down a little bit, all right? You're sucking up all the air at the game, and you think someone will want to be with you with that big old nose. You got to have honest conversations, but I would never come out here and tell you that my kid's nose so big he can't get a date. That's the way I look at football. These guys know what their weaknesses are. In fact, a lot of their play calling, in my opinion, hides their weaknesses. That is exactly what you're supposed to do to the enemy. Shout out to all my people who served in the military. You don't tell nobody what your Achilles heel is. But you do make a hard evaluation and you ask yourself, are we good enough? Good enough to compete is not the same as being good enough to win a championship. And there's a guy that's coaching this team that knows exactly what that looks like, and he did it with a superlative offensive line. And there's another guy that had a franchise get very, very close, and they probably should have won a couple of those games in those NFC title games out in San Francisco, that knows exactly what it looks like, even though they didn't get it, right? It doesn't mean that they can't be questioned, because I questioned them about not giving up a 4th round pick, but willing to give up a 5th round pick when they have so many damn picks for another player that the fans probably wanted. I'm just being real, man. This is what it is. So there's a disconnect when it comes to team building. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ezra Cleveland, and then talk more about understanding the team building aspect of this, and really give the Jaguars a bunch of kudos. And those kudos will be because, as I put on social media, we shouldn't be beefing, man. Trevor Lawrence is the asset that we need to protect. And Trevor Lawrence just got another bodyguard. But first, I want to tell you about something that has really helped me in my transparency the last couple of days, and that's DoorDash. My family has gone through something very tragic. I didn't mention it on the podcast, but you guys know on social media, I lost a very close friend of mine who happens to also be my sister-in-law. Friends of ours have sent DoorDash from all of our local places because they knew we were dealing with so much other stuff. It is invaluable what DoorDash offers and what they've done. All your local restaurants, all your favorite grocery stores, local spots that I love. When you don't think you need to eat, this has been a godsend for us. So we really do appreciate DoorDash, and you need to do the same thing, man, because you can get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKED23, LOCKED 23. Now that's subject to change. Terms do apply, but DoorDash has always been great. But I would not be honest if I did not tell you that the last few days, DoorDash has been a lifesaver, and I thank my friends for that. Make sure you tap into DoorDash. Locked23 is the code. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. All right, man, running it down here on Locked On Jaguars on a live edition. I see a bunch of people chiming in. I want to get to you all, but I really can't. I have to tap into this content real quick. What do we get in Ezra Cleveland? He's a good football player. Luke Braun hit me up and told me that he covers. Luke Braun works for Locked On NFL and Locked On Minnesota Vikings. And Luke told me that, yeah, man, the dude he can play. He can play. So I'm not going to make a quandary out of a luxury. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to sit here and act like we got all of these problems. You know what I'm saying? It's like you hit a scratch off for $5,000 and you start pulling your hair out wondering which bill you're going to pay first. No, that ain't what we're going to do. What we're going to do here is talk about the good part of it. And what that is the Jacksonville Jaguars have upgraded. They got a guy who started 40 out of 42 games. Rumor has it, I saw it somewhere online. I'm not going to lie to you. Someone said that he wants to play left tackle. He has an expiring contract. So add him to the list of guys that the Jaguars are going to have to figure out if they pay or not. I say, even if that's the truth, what harm is it when you get a look-see for 9 games, not including the playoffs, of exactly who you have? I don't think we need to tiptoe around guys who we know, guys who we're familiar with. The Jaguars don't make this move if it's not a good move for a team that thinks that they have a chance. They also don't make this move if it's not aimed at making sure that they protect Trevor Lawrence. And then we don't know what those perceived weaknesses are that they have about their own ball club. I have my opinion, and I could still be wrong. I'm paid to give my opinion. I don't talk as definitively about this because those guys are in that building and they know exactly what's going on. Could it be health related? Could it be that both Walker Little and Cam Robinson have missed substantial time? Could it be that every now and then I look up and Brandon Scherf's on the ground writhing in pain and he's hurt? Could it be that while the right tackle has done well, they believe in a stretch run, maybe some more experience, and maybe still having him and running 6 players? Maybe they're at the point that what they do is, and if you watch Doug with his play calling, they insert people in certain parts of the game, like and they emphasize them, right? And mainly with Jamal Agnew. Because I think what they do is they say, who's good at what? And why are we need to run this play, and this guy's the best at that. So boom, stick him in the game. But nobody knows what that play is because maybe there's something they never run before. I just think with situational football, because they believe that we are a good team, what the Jaguars have said is, if we can get this guy, even if for a half-year rental, and then we get a look-see and see what we have, and maybe he does come here and shake things up because he's one of our best 5. Well, maybe we're making a run at it. We're making a run here. We got a shot. But we have guys that have been injured. We have guys that have been banged up, right? What's the harm in getting a dude that started 40 out of 42 games? Now, I heard he wants to play left tackle and he wants to get paid. It's a problem we'll deal with later. Here's what I mean by team building. When you sit here and want this coach to sell the farm or this GM to sell the farm, and he may be wrong and you might be right, but let me tell you why it makes no sense to continue getting to spats about it. The biggest self ratio in the world for Trent Baalke, and would probably make his boss go, what? Oh, really? Is if you go out and use a first round pick on Daniil Hunter or anybody else. At the same time, you're looking at a dude in Josh Allen that has earned $90 to $100 million extension. And then at the same time, you have raved about Trayvon Walker. Now, I don't know about y'all. This ain't Alabama or Georgia where you can just stack recruits. There's a thing called the salary cap. And though we often talk about how that cap isn't real and it could be maneuvered, it is much easier to do that in the offseason than it is. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the commitment, the guys you have told your boss that are the leaders of this team, that are going to run this team. And oh, by the way, here's the big one. In the last 18 games, the Jaguars are 14-4. Why am I going to self-ratio myself when my record says that I'm 14-4 and then have to go down the hallway and tell my boss that I'm giving up a first-round pick in a draft? This is something I've used very well. This has been a real good tool for me, the first round. So I'm going to go and tell my boss that a first-round pick, I'm going to give it up, and then I'm going to pay the guy $100 million while I'm paying the other guy $100 million. And the dude that I picked number one overall that I keep telling people is the guy that I want him to be, but he's doing everything for us and he's worked it and he's going to develop into this all pro. And I love Trayvon Walker. Oh, I'm just going to move him inside to a 3 technique where I paid Roy Robinson Harris $30 million, right? And now I got Foley Fatukasi making a bunch of money, and I still got Devon Hamilton making a bunch of money, but I got all these dudes to re-sign. At some point, it becomes a self-ratio. At some point, you're doing your job and you're covering yourself by not doing your job right the first time, so you got to backtrack and do it behind you. I'm sure somewhere there's this chart where they allocate funds. If you spend too much money in one area, you won't have enough in another area when you need it. It's called fiscal responsibility. It's called team building. This is what they do. Those guys that do this for a living think that every single move they make is right until it's obviously wrong. You're going to tell Trent Baalke he's obviously wrong when he's 14-4 in his last 18 games. And the defense has won a lot of their games this year. And teams do this now. When you go and try to get a free agent from another team, there are other teams trying to do it too. And they're going to take the best deal. This is the same thing I talked about in the NBA. Portland wasn't obligated to send Damian Lillard to Miami for peanuts. You think those teams are sitting there worried about the same things that a Jaguar fan is worried about? Hell no, they ain't worried about that. And then, like I said, Trent Baalke ain't going to tell you exactly how they feel. If Doug Peterson ever comes out here and tells you exactly what's on his mind, y'all ought to call for him to be fired. Because he's not just telling it to you, he's telling it to everybody else too. Come on, man. That's all. It's not about me. It's not about being right. It's about reading the room. Ain't not one person in that building. And I know ain't something I'm supposed to be saying, but ain't not one person in that building, nary a person over there done picked up the phone and called T-Wig in the barbershop or around here limping on this bad hip and said, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're not, but you can't tell nobody. It just doesn't happen that way. You hear stuff, but you hear it from agents and you hear it from people in other media markets who have people that they know, agents, players, whatever. That's where I get a lot of information from. But most of the information I get, guess where it comes from? Watching them and checking the box and what their tendencies are. You think Trent Baalke is going to usurp himself publicly? You done lost your mind. Let's talk about protecting the asset. What that means and why we need to stop beefing, because this actually means something really, really good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It might not be everything you wanted, but guess what it was? something that's really, really good that's going to help Trevor Lawrence. And we're going to break that down and tell you exactly why this is going to help Trevor Lawrence and how this is a good thing. After I tell you about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Man, I was in it to win it. I think I might have won some money. I got to go check because I play the FanDuel fantasy games, but I also play in a certain way. I play the sportsbook, and it is absolutely phenomenal, man. Get all of the knowledge you want. I even take what they say on the sports book and I apply it to my fantasy football teams because they are often so right. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You got to score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. You heard me. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, all one word, and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. We are live here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast on YouTube. Man, I sound like Brent Musburger when I said that, didn't I? You guys are an official partner of me here on Locked On Jaguars. This has been a big time move, man, in my opinion, because what this does is this gives another bodyguard to 16. 16 is Trevor Lawrence. Think about all the little throws that he makes, and he just needs just a little bit more room. Think about how you felt when he had to run out of that pocket and got tripped up and was down there trying to figure out whether his knee got hurt. Why is Doug Peterson the king of going for it on fourth and a little bit? And sometimes you like it and sometimes you don't. You don't have to go for it on fourth and a little bit if on down number 1 and down number 3, that block is held a little bit longer. And that 1 foot that you needed, it's now first down instead of fourth and a foot. Football is a game of inches. The better you can get up front, the better you'll be. I suspect what they're going to do, and I put this out there because I am curious. If he's as good as I believe he is based on the tape, and if he's as good as Luke Braun told me he is, here's what I think. That I think the second that he walks into that room, he's one of the 5 best players in that room. That's what I believe. I do. Now, what does that mean? You might as well break that down to 4 because Luke Fortin is the center, and that's what it is, right? You don't get a guy, bring him in and change his position on a team that's 6-2 and in charge of that and one of the top seeds in the whole conference. You just don't do that. And they like Luke Fortin. Luke Fortin is a technician, but y'all been knowing forever that Luke Fortin ain't very strong. And we talked about that here. It's been known that strength is one of the things that he needs to improve on, but he's a hell of a technician and he understands. So there'll be a little bit of player development. By the way, let me hit this real quick. There's player development in the NFL. That's why people don't rush quarterbacks. That's why Pittsburgh, the Steelers, have Broderick Jones on the bench right now until he's ready to go. That's why Devin Lloyd took a little while. You understand? That's why Travis Etienne got better in the offseason than he. So if you look at last year, when did he get it? Was it week 15, week 16? No, he was the same running back most of the year, right? But he came back different this year, and he runs differently, doesn't he? Yeah, player development. You can develop players. You can develop players without them actually being on the field playing. Quarterback is a little bit different because here's the difference, and this is the disconnect. There are some things you can't learn unless you play. How about that? But there are some things you can't learn before you get out there and get somebody killed too. Right? So here's it's not a quandary, like I say, but I'm curious about it. What do they do if Ezra Cleveland, love the name, by the way. Sound like he eat black eyed peas and neck bones and stuff, and cornbread. Ezra Cleveland. I like that name. Ezra Cleveland comes in and here's what happens. If he's one of the 5 best, now we're going to narrow that to 4 because he ain't taking the center position. What do? Depends on the health of Walker Little, right? Definitely. Depends on the health of Walker Little. Cam Robinson has come back and has played well, right? So the Cam Robinson Walker Little thing, I think that's his own little party over there, right? I think Ezra starts at left guard. Little, then you have to wonder what you're going to do with Little. Little has played all over. Little had played more right tackle than he had left tackle before the start of this season. And ironically, Anton Harrison has played more left tackle than he has right tackle. I don't know if Little's been better at left tackle, left guard, or right tackle. Don't know. I watched the games, and even if I watched the all 22, if I watched every snap, I wouldn't be able to tell you about offensive linemen like that. I do just pick up the phone or I hit up Tony Baselli, or I hit up Brian Baldinger, and I'd be like, "Can you explain this to me?" Or I hit one of my guys that played in college, or that might have been on the practice squad, people that I know. I might hit Rashad Hill up, who I used to cut his hair when he was a little kid. He played for the Vikings and the Jaguars. I might say, "Hey, what's going on?" That's the kind of stuff that I do, because you have to admit when you don't know something, right? So I don't know, but I do know this. If I base it on what the public has told me, and y'all know that I've said this, I like Walker Little. I'm a fan. I root for Walker Little. But y'all act like Walker Little is Larry Allen. The way they were telling me, how you got to cut Cam, you got to do this, you got Walker. So y'all not going to sit here and tell me now that you're going to reduce this dude in his 3rd year to just being a swing guy when y'all told me he was an all-pro. You see where I'm going? That's the quandary. What do? Anton Harrison has played better. He fought. But do you allow Walker Little, if he gets healthy, to now compete, or do you make him a swing tackle? That's the easiest thing, and it's the most logical thing, because he's banged up and he's hurt. But the Jaguars have an obligation, not to the fans, not to Trent Baalke's ego, not to Doug Peterson. They have an obligation to the players in that locker room, and mainly to Trevor Lawrence, to do whatever it takes to keep him upright and to put the best 5 players. Do I know who they believe or they think are their best 5? I absolutely do not. And I challenge anybody. And if you're right about it and you say it, then cool. Kudos to you. But I guarantee you, unless you live with them, you don't know. You do not know. I wanted them, and most fans wanted them to run Dewey Wingard off. How much would y'all have regretted that if that had happened? Got to protect the asset. So, just as a quick recap on this fine day, the trade deadline has come and gone. Last year, the Jaguars got Calvin Ridley, a fixture of the future. This year, they did not get an edge rusher. Rumor has it, and I'll tell you who reported, me O'Brien, my homie, works at 1010XL on the Noonday Show here in Jacksonville, said that they were talking to the Patriots about Josh Uche, and it was between a 4th and a 5th round pick, some haggling. That if Trent Baalke did that, I might go down there and put him in the figure 4 with my bad hip. The other thing is, I did hear this information last week, but my source told me, take it with a grain of salt, man. But they said the dude wouldn't lie to him, that the Jaguars tried to get Danielle Hunter. And then they offered a 2nd and a 3rd, and Minnesota hung up the phone. That is not gospel. But I'll tell you that now, because the trade deadline is gone. We can go over the little things that we heard that we could not substantiate, but I'm telling you, it's what it is. I love y'all's passion, though. Somebody said the Jaguars fan base is weird. No, I like that weird most of the time. But sometimes that weird comes back to bite you a little bit. But it's all in the game, man. That's what we do. I know I rub people the wrong way all the time, but that's all right. We still family. We good. My wife loves me. She's in the other room over there. I drive her crazy more than anybody. It's all good, man. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 6-2, 14-4 in their last game. Bask in it. Don't be sitting here finding stuff to argue about. Tony Wiggins here with the Locked On Jaguars podcast, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are